Hi, I'm Tracey Kutschker. I'm Director Curator at Salmon Arm Arts Centre, and I am so very pleased to be joined today by Chris Cran, all the way from Calgary. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Tracy. How are you?
I'm really doing well, actually, and
Good.
I'm so happy to see you. It's been 2 years, I guess, right, since your
Yes,
exhibition at our art gallery,
yes.
and it was just such a gift to your home community to come with all of your fabulous new work. I can't believe that we were so lucky as to see fresh new work right after your National Gallery exhibition. It was just such a treat for Salmon Arm. So thank you again
Oh,
for that. That was
well,
fabulous.
thank you for having me there. It was I really had a great time. It was so
Oh,
much fun
that's
working
so
with
good.
all of you.
Yeah, well, we were over the moon. So, how are you doing during this isolation pandemic time as an artist now? Like, as you know, you're one of the prestige Canadian artists who does do a lot of international work, and this must have changed course for you.
Well, didn't change course for me in terms of what I normally do is go to my studio and work. So that's still the same. It's everything's quietened down. I actually have probably more time in my studio now, but I'm enjoying the quiet.
Oh,
It's just something new, and I'm just I know there's some concern about all of the stuff that's going on, but I'm just I think it's my responsibility to enjoy because that's what helps make my work.
uh,
And so, I'm paying attention to that.
yeah, absolutely. So, can you tell us how your work has shifted or changed during this time? Are you working on anything new and unusual?
Yes, I am. I've got one thing I started doing, and I've had it in my mind for a while, was I have got a lot of paintings from various periods in time that didn't work, that were, you know, just not satisfying enough, or anyway, they're stacked on my shelves, and they're particularly from the 90s. And so I've been taking some of these and reworking them. And that's been fun to try and figure out how to make these things that were just almost like a background, turn it into something else. So that was a really good start. But as I was doing that, I'm sniffing around my studio, because my studio is a mess. It's a good size, but I've got so much stuff I can hardly move in it. I just had a big show at the Nickel Art Gallery at the University of Calgary, and all these paintings went out because I just picked out paintings that I'd had for, that I still owned, and and made a show out of them. And while that was out, I was able to clean out a lot of stuff and just get rid of it. And it looks like I've got some room now. So what happened was, when the work came back, you just filled it up again. So so anyway, in this process, I began kind of snooping around back in the areas of my studio, and in the back room, I found some things that I bought in the early 90s. In the early 90s, there was just down the street from my gallery in Calgary, there was a camera store that was going out of business. And I went down there, and they were selling everything off. And I found a bunch of photo finishing plates. They're plates meant to, you take a wet photograph out of the bath, whatever the thing is called, and lay it down on the plate, and it gives that photograph a smooth surface. And I bought, they were about $36 each, and I bought about 100 of them for $2 each, and never used them. They were just sitting back in there. And so I pulled them out and started some experiments with them, and all of a sudden I found this as a usable medium just making my stencils on top of this.
Oh, yeah.
And they just went, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm just having so much fun. They're not big. They're 20 inches by 14 inches, some 17 inches by 12 inches, like that kind of size.
Yeah.
But, I can just go and see what they do, see what I can do with them.
Nice. So this is something you wouldn't necessarily have pursued if you hadn't been sort of given this break, this time to just focus on your studio. And
I think so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so there might be an entire exhibition that comes out of this.
Well, my Calgary gallerist came by the other day, and he saw them, and he says, "We got to do a show." So we're going to do a show.
That's so great.
And my son, who lives in Los Angeles and has a gallery, he and his wife have a gallery down there. He's also interested in doing something. So there'll be lots of work and lots of possibilities. So
yeah.
And I got a gallery in Toronto as well. So it's just he hasn't seen that work yet. But I'm going to once I get more of it together, then I'll be able to show all of them.
Yeah. So here we are. We're at the beginning of June right now. So your other galleries, the one in Toronto and the one in LA, that you're of course associated with, are opening up now.
That's right. Yeah. The gallery in Los Angeles, my son's gallery, was they were closed for the period, and then they started off only by appointment. Then they just closed it down, and virtual visits, and then now they've just opened a new show, and people can go in, but they would have to make an appointment and just come in, just a few people at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and same thing with probably the gallery in Toronto, and the gallery here is just opening up again, the same thing, a new show. But my gallery here, Trepanier Bay Gallery, they had window displays. So there's on all the windows there was changing work. But there's an artist from Ontario, Win Gilentz. And at night they made these big videos that went up on the floor above their gallery. These two big eyes that look back and look around like that. That ran all night.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. So the gallery,
also
these galleries are doing things.
Yeah. Oh, everybody had to very quickly figure out how to keep the sort of the cultural vibe alive, right?
Yes.
And online content, it was a bit stale really quickly, that some galleries were just putting their permanent collections online, just like, here's some old stuff. So people figured out very fast how to be innovative and do something different. And I saw on your Instagram that you had taken a photo of a drive-by art thing. So there was an easel and a big painting outside with an artist's name on it. Was that something that you participated in or just noticed somewhere?
No, I think that was just something I noticed. Yes.
Huh.
Yeah.
That was pretty wild. I could just imagine doing something like that in Salmon Arm.
Yeah. In Calgary, Contemporary Calgary, which is I'm on the board of. It's they've taken organization has been around for a while, taken over the old science center, the old planetarium, and turning it into a contemporary and modern art gallery.
Wow.
But what they're doing, they closed down. But what they did is they started this whole thing where they're connecting to almost every day. There's tours on their site of some gallery across the country. So they connected all these galleries connected and are now part of this. It's really great.
Yeah, and actually there's a one in BC called Field Trip. And I think it might have been, I might be mistaken, it might have been started by Vancouver, but I know that Kamloops Art Gallery was on it. And so they did an artist talk. Don Lawrence did a talk ahead of what was going to be his exhibition as part of this virtual field trip. It was pretty great. So yeah, it's because we're really good thinkers. We're problem solvers, right? Artists are problem solvers by nature. So we were faced with a problem, we figured out how to deal with it.
That's right. I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah,
it's so great.
Well, it is, and
it's going to change things all over. I think
Well, and The sustainability model, I mean, I think the bigger art world is starting to rethink how we manage the big shows, right? The blockbuster shows. And maybe we can't rely on those big ones anymore because of the capacity issues that now we might be facing for the next who knows how long.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is that something that you're kind of seeing in your future plans? Like if your next 2 years, say, were kind of planned out and booked for these bigger shows, are those things changing for you?
Well, I don't have anything planned. I have all these shows that just happened, so I'm in that regard I'm sort of lucky. But I'm interested in just seeing where things go. This is a mystery, which I sort of love. It's like in one sense, I mean, there's all sorts of horrible things that are going on as well, but as well there's a I'm fascinated by things like what happened, say, in India and China and LA, where people were seeing blue skies, or seeing the mountains that they'd never seen before. In China, there's apparently some of those cities, children are seeing the blue skies for the first time.
Oh, wow.
So there's, nature's bigger than all of this.
And that is something, do you anticipate entering into your work? Because you've got a lot of very political work in your collection. So do you see this as kind of becoming almost like a, a theme going forward?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't think of my work as being political, but it's set in such a way that a viewer can fill in. The viewer fills in the meaning, and I'm really interested in that territory. I'm interested in perception. I'm interested in the formation of meaning, those mechanics. So I think where I like to hit it is getting it like that. I mean, I've always talked about this. One of my favorite artists, Cézanne, how he painted, because he never. There's this kind of sense that nothing's ever quite finished there, and what I realized about Cézanne is that uh, he really made it clear that the viewer finishes the work. And I say this because I remember one time going and seeing a painting at the Guggenheim in New York. I was a little back gallery. There was a painting by Cézanne, a painting of a meadow on a hot summer day, small painting. And I was just looking at it, and I'd kind of been off and on Cézanne for a while, and I'm standing there looking at it, and all of a sudden I felt the heat. I felt like I was 10 years old, standing in the field outside my parents' place in Salmon Arm in a hot summer day. And I went, wow, what's that? And my explanation was that, or for it was that Cézanne looked and he saw a color, and he mixed that color, not just an arbitrary color, but he mixed that color and put it down with a brushstroke, and he looked what was next to that, another color, and he just did that over and over and over again. So what he did is accumulated all those loose brushstrokes, and not a kind of high realism, but just enough there. And because he got the colors right, he got the light right. And this nervous system knows through a zillion experiences what the temperature of that light is. Bang, hence. And so I had this experience, like, wow, that's amazing. And then I'm looking at it for a few minutes, just going, wow, Cézanne, and then finally I figured it was time to leave. And I turned to leave, and my body turned, and my head didn't, because my gaze was still locked into the space of the painting, and I wrenched my neck painfully.
Wow.
So, two different phenomena going on. The body leaving, I haven't extracted my gaze from that space.
Wow.
So that was, that's it.
Yep.
There's that for me is one of the examples that tell me about how a viewer is actually does half the work.
Well, and that is especially like you have really played upon that. Like in the exhibition of work that you brought to Salmon Arm, there was an awful lot of optical challenges.
Uh-huh.
People stared and stared, trying to sort out how you were able to manipulate the way that they see the images.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
kind of exploration is pretty fascinating.
It keeps on fascinating me. Yeah.
Yeah, because you've explored it in a number of different ways. It's kind of interesting to have, we have a very small gallery. And so you brought that really great selection of work that kind of showed some progression between some of your early work, the really high realism self-portraits and all the way to the most current pieces and referencing, yeah, like just all kinds of things, film, all sorts of things. And so it was really interesting to see all the different ways that you're challenging us with that, with interpretation, with how we see.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that works.
Yeah. And so because you've covered all this ground already, where are you going to go next?
Well, I think it's a continuous thing, trying to actually return more and more to basics. That's there's stuff that's still uncovered that I can keep on finding out. That's what I'm sort of, I guess I'm sort of fascinated with. That I keep on going, what's this? But it's got to do with our own perception, our human perceptions, part of the biz. So I have to, I remember this quote from somebody years ago that it said the mind can't entertain two things at the same time. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. So remember that painting of the red man black cartoon
Mm-hmm.
with there's a face and then there's the kind of cartoon lines over top. That's kind of an example of that. And what I found is that if you give the viewer two things to look at, they go between the two. They travel. So once they're traveling, they're engaged.
Yeah.
It's a cheap trick, but it works. And I'm fascinated with that. Again, that it gets just that engagement.
Yeah.
And how to activate that engagement.
Yeah. Do you find that you do a little exploration of other galleries, other artworks? Like, do other artists intrigue you about how they treat the same thing?
Well, I don't know whether it's the same thing. I guess because my own, I have this interest as well in how everybody is different. Everybody is different, and this is an example I use in when I give a talk. Is I came across a photograph of sand done photographed with a macro lens, and each grain of sand looks like a jewel when it's you see it that scale, and not one is the same. So if the sand's all that different, we're completely different, even though even though we got these kind of weird dualities in in the world. I'm a Democrat and I'm a Republican, or not a Republican, that kind of stuff. Those kind of human beings sort of reduce it down to these sort of dualities. But I'm fascinated about how, because I taught at an art college, and it's like no matter everybody, they have their own enthusiasm, they notice things that are really particular to them. So I'm thinking that, I think your question was, what was your question again?
Well, it's about how when you experience other artworks, other
Oh,
artists who
yes,
are seeing
yes.
things in their own unique way, like, do you find that it is intriguing to you to see how they interpret things as well, like the same kind of idea?
Very much so. But also I think that I'm fascinated by what other artists, where their attention goes. Some artists are just like so into pure color. Some artists are into a message. Some artists are into, you know, like there's just all sorts of different things. And what I guess from my sense is that what I enthuse about is when I see something that makes me go, oh, like that. And I, you know, just like something like, wow, I can't, that's, you know, and I remember I've seen lots of art like that, unsuspected. Agnes Martin, she was a Canadian who moved to the States, and she made paintings that were basically lines. A lot of them were just lines on a big canvas, and there's some little bit of color, but hardly any. And I remember the first time, the first time I went to New York with my wife. We went to the Museum of Modern Art, and there's a room with 10 Agnes Martins in it, given by David Geffen. And we go in, and I just looked back at the doorway, and people look through the door. Oh, nothing in there. And they just carry on, and over again. These just kind of like just people going by, and we were in there for 3 minutes, and Denise starts crying, and she says, "Why am I crying?" And she was so moved by something that, and I don't know. It's like there's it's hard to tell, but I remember my own experience of seeing a show of hers at the Glenbow when I first walked in, and I had a sense of it that I knew that I didn't even need to go and see the whole show, even though I did. But in a minute and a half, I was like, I got that same kind of feeling. So it's like it's inexplicable. It's not about, you know, a nice picture of a horse or whatever. It's like some kind of different kind of experience.
Yeah, a different kind of connection that you can't.
Yeah.
You can't really.
And I love that I can't put my finger on it.
Yeah.
You know, so I see a lot of art that I really love, whether it's locally or wherever. You know, I always like seeing art in the flesh.
Yeah.
Because reproductions. I mean, I've seen art that looks better in reproductions than in the flesh. So it's kind of like there's the thing about real art in the flesh is that it has a physicality that addresses your physical nervous system,
mm-hmm.
that a reproduction doesn't.
Oh, exactly.
However, you can get something from a reproduction as well. So.
Right. And then what we know about photography and digital screens is that they can portray thousands of colors, but our brain can perceive billions of colors. So it does kind of make it so that things that happen in real life,
Yes,
in physical form, are much more intense, like they're more impactful to our brains. So yeah. And so
that's right. Yeah.
I want to also ask you about, you had an opportunity to, you know, just jump on a ship not too long ago and take a little trip up in the northern parts of the
Around
planet.
Baffin Island.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that was amazing.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, a friend of mine he's the CEO of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, named John Haeger. I've known John for a long time. He and I, he was a collector and he was a journalist in Edmonton, and he eventually did a biography of Brian Gysin, the fellow who invented the Dream Machine, the fellow who William Burroughs said he was the only man I ever respected. But John got to know about Brian Gysin because he was reading a book by Paul Bowles, and Canadian Brian Gysin was mentioned. And so he phoned me and said, do you know who Brian Gysin is? Yeah, he's a friend of William Burroughs. And he did this research in Edmonton and found out Gysin had lived there from the age of 2 to the age of 16, found all sorts of people he went to school with and things like that. Anyway, he contacted Burroughs Communications in Lawrence, Kansas, and asked if found out that Burroughs was the executor of the estate, and asked if he could come down and look at the archives. They said, yes, you can come down, but you can't meet William. He gets down there. He says, that's fine. He gets down there, and the first thing they say, would you like to meet William? And he and William hit it off. And I think William spotted him as the possible biographer, because John was a writer of Brian Geisler, which eventually happened. Mm. So John and I later on went down to visit William Burroughs in Thanksgiving in '96, and there was all these rock stars doing a 3.5-hour concert tribute to William. Wow. So, and we were hanging out at William's place every night. It was great. It was fantastic. Anyway, John eventually went on and he went to the Globe and Mail, then he went to the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and he was visiting one day, and he said to Denise and I, you guys are explorers of a different kind. I'm going to put your names forward to become fellows of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, which he did, and he's expanded now there's cultural exploration as well contained within that society, which is fantastic. So we several years after that, we had the possibility of going on a trip around on a boat with 65 other people around Baffin Island. So we flew to Ottawa, then flew to where did we fly to? Anyway, flew somewhere else, and then got on a boat and went around Baffin Island, and for 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, and it was amazing. We saw one day we saw nothing but fog outside the window, and another day we'd see ice floes with one day with a polar bear on it with cubs. The polar bear had blood all over its bum and all over its face because they had a seal that they devoured, and then we were out on a boat, and there's walruses with their huge tusks coming out of the water very close to us. We went to there was the grave of some of the I can't remember the name, blanking on the name of the boat, but there's 4 graves of some of the people who were looking for, the Northwest Passage, and but it was just this amazing experience. We went into this Pond Inlet, this great town. We went in, and that met all sorts of people just wandering through the town, and these there was a bunch of Inuit performers that had prepped something for us. So there's a guy who was in that movie, I think it was The Long Runner, and he was a drummer, and he played a drum. And then this other guy did this, young guy did this, athlete did this thing where he stood, and there's a rock hung about 8 feet up, and leaps up and kicks the rock and lands back on his right foot. He did that. It was like, we're amazed. And then these 2 women came out and did their throat singing.
Oh yeah. And
the throat singing was amazing because they did this. We were watching it, and you know how that works. It's almost a competition because the first person who laughs loses, right? So they asked, they did this, and we were like, wow. And they asked if would anybody like to try, and Denise put up her hand, and she went up, and she beat the Inuit woman.
Oh my gosh!
it was really fun.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so wonderful.
Yeah. So, and and no Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Just mingling with all sorts of people from all over the world, and just great conversations and seeing just, mind-boggling things.
Yeah. So that kind
I
of thing is life-changing, isn't it?
Oh yeah. When I came back and then a few months later I drove down into the Kootenays. But as I'm driving, I'm just looking at the mountains and the hills and everything in a new way, because it's like I can see structures there that became evident to me on that trip.
Oh, wow. Well,
Yeah,
that's so exciting. Like it's a wonderful opportunity for artists to be able to experience what scientists and like other industry people who just look at things differently than we do, and then when we get to tag along and see those same things, it's pretty spectacular.
yeah, yeah. It's no, that was life changing. Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm conscious of your time, and so I'm wanting to wrap up. But before I do, I want to know, and this is something that I've asked a couple of artists, do you have any advice for artists working in this time right now? Any advice to people who are like may not be able to be creative in the same way that they've always been, because we're struggling with a lot of feelings of uncertainty, feelings of trauma, and of course, right now, a huge amount of racial tension and action and protest going on. So, being somebody who has successfully been able to digest and kind of portray some of the things going on around you all the time, do you have any advice for artists right now about how to process these times and how to still be um, expressing oneself in a really thoughtful and meaningful way?
Well,
No
I think
pressure or anything, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think it would be the same advice I would have given to the students I've had over the years that I don't have anymore. But it's that just go and even spend 10 minutes doing something. 10 minutes, or just as long as you give yourself to that, because what happens is that when things are difficult, and I know all sorts of ex-students I'd run into them, they're working in a coffee shop, and I say, so what are you doing? And I'm not doing, like that. And the advice I would give is that they actually give a little period of time, half an hour, whatever they can do, and every day they spend some time doing that. Whatever happens in that time that they give, um, that's unforeseen. But uh, that 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 period of activity for an artist is fundamental. Just to be able to go and do it without you know without naming what one should do, just because we're all creative. Human beings are creative. We're basically all, it's, all that stuff you hear, or I've heard all my life, all that thing about, oh, I don't have the talent, I don't have the this, and I don't have the that. That's a kind of procrastination. Everybody can do something. And as soon as you get into it, you start to enjoy it, and without comparing it to anything else or anybody else, or just seeing what your own sensibility will just do, um, without judging. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful. I know that that's something I try to do. If it's just a doodle or if it's just a little bit of writing, just a little something every day. You're right. It just helps keep you real and
Yeah.
understanding who you are and how you're processing the world.
Yeah.
It's good advice.
It's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chris. This has been really delightful. I'm really glad that we
Well,
were
great.
able to check in and see how you're doing.
Well,
So,
great to talk to you. Yeah. I just wanted to say one more thing having to do with Salmon Arm. When I was a student, I used to go and visit a woman named Gladys Johnson, who lived in Salmon Arm, and I started buying her paintings. it was like $3 or $5 or whatever. Or this one doesn't have much in it, she said. This you can have that for $3. And eventually I put together a collection. It was about 40 paintings and did a show at the Glenbow. We did a show in Salmon Arm of that work too. But just was like one of those things, like, you know, the work, it fascinated me. It looked, to me, it looked better than so much of the expressionist kind of paintings in the 80s that I saw a lot of. This was raw and just right on the money. So it's like, you know, anyway, everybody's got that kind of thing, that there's something they can find and they like, and
Yeah.
see where it takes you.
Yeah.
It takes you upstream to something else.
Yeah.
To something else. You keep on noticing.
It's so interesting that you've got that you found that connection with Gladys' work too. Like it's kind of interesting because she's been a bit of a forgotten phenomenon here in Salmon Arm. But because you have that collection, every once in a while it kind of, you know, we get a chance to see the work again. So
yeah. I've had emails from people who live in Salmon Arm who they found one in a garage sale or something like that, or a store, you know, like that. So yeah, it's great.
And you wrote a book about her, right? You have a book that
well, we did a catalog at the Glenbow Museum about her. Right. Yeah. What I've seen. I was working with Patricia Ainsley, who was the curator at the Glenbow at the time, and we did it together.
So there you are, like more legacy. Okay, well, I do hope that the rest of this pandemic plays out for you in a healthy and productive way. And thank you again for joining us today. It's been just a nice opportunity to get a glimpse into your life.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Bye-bye now.
Take care. Bye-bye.